Hey y'all, so I'm here doing the nap tee from Lowland Kids. I just wanted to go over the pattern pieces that we have before we jump into sewing. I have a front bodice, back bodice, two sleeves. I have 4 Henley strips, so 2 of your main fabric and then 2 of interfacing or woven. I prefer woven, I think it gives it a cleaner look when you're working with knits because it doesn't make the knit look so stiff. It kind of lets it keep its shape. And then I have a neck binding piece. So you'll notice that my bottom of my back bodice is cut a little straighter than the pattern calls for. On the main pattern, it's more of a curved back. I just personally don't like that look. It's not the style that I go for typically. So I just followed the same curve from the side seam as the front bodice does. So the side seams will still match up, but then instead of coming down where the fold is, it just is slightly tapered up. And yeah, that's it for the pattern pieces. The first step is going to be ironing. If you're using interfacing, you're going to apply the interfacing to the back of these 2 Henley pieces and iron it on. I'm not using interfacing like I said, so I'm just going to go and iron each of these pieces in half separately, and then we'll be back and we'll get to sewing. All right, so my pieces are ironed down and I sandwiched the woven fabric in between the layers of the knit fabric that will be the Henley. If you're doing interfacing, it'll obviously be in there, and then you'll just press it in half lengthwise so that there's a fold, and that's what's going to make your Henley. I used my pattern piece to cut down the center. Let's see if I can get this. Use my pattern piece to cut down the center, and then you cut a 1/2 inch in either direction of that center cut. And now we're just going to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance straight down here. So you want to be pretty precise with this, and you don't have to use a stretch stitch for this because your interfacing is going to act as a stabilizer, so this shouldn't really stretch at all once it's attached. So go ahead and do that stitch, and I'll meet you back here. So our next step, now that our Henley pieces are sewn on, is to go ahead and serge down just this part of the Henley, so you're getting the interfacing and the Henley piece, but not the shirt. So you'll just hold it separately. This step is totally optional, just gives a nice clean finish to the inside. And you'll notice that the Henley piece extends past the cut line. That's what we want. You want it to line up at the top and extend down farther for when we flip it inside. We need that extra bit to attach the pieces together essentially. So we're just going to serge down this edge and then we'll meet back. Alright, so I went ahead and serged down that edge, making sure not to catch any of the shirt, and I just brought it all the way down to the bottom because some of this won't be entirely cut away. So you just want to finish it all the way through, and our next step is going to be to open this little part up. You can see I didn't catch the shirt. I folded it back while I serged so that I made sure I didn't catch it. Our next step is going to be to find the center of this notch that we cut, and we're just going to cut at a 45-degree angle down to line up with where the cut ends. So you want to be careful, make sure you're not clipping any stitches, and then we're going to go ahead and actually trim this part of the shirt away that we kept out. Trim as close to the stitches as you can, but make sure you don't cut into them. So I went ahead and cut straight down and up the 45-degree angle on both sides, and then trimmed away the shirt right along the seam line. As you can see, as close as I could get, there's about 1/8 of an inch left. And what we're going to do next is flip the Henley pieces in. Overlap them. You can decide which one you want on top, like if you're doing a patterned fabric or if one side came out better than the other. Like this one's kind of plain, but this one's nice. So I'll put this one on top. Flip back over. And you're going to want to make sure that this triangle is folded down. Overlap these, and you're going to sew across the triangle in both of these Henley pieces so that they all become one part, getting as close to the corner as you can without overlapping any of the main shirt. Hey guys, so I accidentally messed up when I told you to sew down the Henley piece to the main bodice. I forgot to tell you to go a ½ inch past the notch that you cut, so that when you flip it through, it's sewn all the way down to where your triangle V ends. So you can see that I have it pinned together, and then you just tuck this in. You want to try to line it up as nicely as you can. I'll have to play around with it a little bit before taking it to my machine, just to get these like nice crisp corners. And so after we sew our line across where the V is, we're going to go ahead and top stitch with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. And then you can do like the little X box down here. You just want to make sure that you're catching only the serged part when you're top stitching, and that you don't accidentally catch your other Henley piece and sew it closed. Okay, so I went ahead and top stitched around and then did my X box. You can see I did not do perfect. Plackets are something you just got to keep working at. Sometimes they come out good, sometimes they come out just slightly wonky, but I think it's pretty good, so I'm happy with it. Next, if you're going to do buttons, you can go ahead and do them now. It'll probably be easier before attaching the back bodice and completing the shirt, but I'm going to do snaps, so I'm just going to wait till the end to do that. If you're going to do buttons, we have other videos that kind of go over it and explain how to do it, so you can look for one of those, ask for a tag if you need it. But for now, we're going to go and take our back bodice and just attach the shoulder seams. Our shoulder seams are attached. Now we're going to take our sleeves. I'm using the short sleeve version, and we're just going to line them up and sew them into the arm side, and then go ahead and fold the shirt right sides together and sew down the arm the arm all the way down the bodice side to close the side seams. Okay, so I went ahead and serged the sleeves on and then serged the side seams closed. And the next step that we're going to do is the neckband. So I do the neckband a little different than the directions call for. They call for like a long, like the neckband is going to go past and then you fold it under and tack it down. Instead, I do it kind of like, I think it's the snap sleeper that does it this way. And so I just cut the neckband the exact same length that it calls for, but then I just round out the edges from the tip down to the sides. And then when you fold it in half, you'll line it up, but it'll kind of curve as you go on, and it'll just create like a nice clean finish right there. And then I will just fold the seam allowance under where the serger lines are and tack it down. So I'll show you what I mean better once I pin it on. Okay, so before I sew it on, here's just like a quick look at what I mean. So right here is where you cut that curve, and you want to match up the raw edges still, and then it'll kind of be a bit of a harsher turn to get it connected, but when you flip it up, it's going to give you a nice finish. And so that's just how I do it. I'm going to go ahead and serge it on now. So now that the neckband is sewn on, you can see it wants to flip down. So what I do is I just flip it up and I tack it down right across the Henley strip. I don't go past it. I don't feel the need to like tack it down all the way around because the rest of it stays the way it should pretty well, and I just prefer to not top stitch things. So I am going to tack this down, and then I'm going to hem the sleeves and the bottom. Okay, so here we go. We have it pretty much done. I need to add the snaps still, but the sleeves are hemmed and the bottom is hemmed, and everything's tacked down, and that's the nap tee.